Welcome to Artistic Adventures. We're up to part 5 on our Cleopatra doll project, and we're still working on costume and jewelry. This is part 2, but there will be a part 3 because I just kept going and going. There's just so much to do for this doll. So we'll start with part 2 now. Alright, when we left off in our last video, I had just made this and baked it. This is the polymer clay crown. I also made this hook. These are implements that she uses that are sort of signs of her nobility. We're going to be painting these and working on those later. The first thing I want to do though is attach this track hair to the back of the crown, and that's what we're going to be braiding and putting some beads on. And actually it's going to be in the next video because I didn't get to it in this one. And this is a little bit too small. I mean, it actually fits her perfectly right now, but I'm going to use this tool that I bought. I actually got this on Wish, and it's for nails, but it's perfect for working on clay and stuff. It helps to sand things a little bit quicker than using a piece of sandpaper, and it was pretty cheap. I think the whole system with like 1,000 different little attachments was like 17 bucks or something. But I'm just going to smooth out this inside and maybe make it just a little bit bigger by cutting off some of that inside portion. And this thing comes with, like I said, so many different little attachments, and you just pull it out. It's not like a Dremel. It's much smaller and easier to use. I'm using this sharp pointed tool now to make a groove in the top of this scepter thing. I'm not sure what it's exactly called. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm going to put some strings through there and glue it. So I wanted to have a little hole. So see, you just pull those out and stick a new one in, and yeah, it's all kinds of different little attachments with it. Now the other thing is on this hook piece, because I made it with my fingers and wrapped it around a piece of wire, it's not exactly smooth. It's a little bit lumpy, so I'm going to use this to make it smoother. And if you can see this, this is an example of what I'm trying to do. These are the two pieces. You see that one has the hook and the other one has the bead things hanging from it. So we're going to work on something similar to that, just to give her a little something extra. Okay, so now I've smoothed these out pretty well, and now I'm going to put coats of this really nice gold glittery paint on it. I really like this gold. It makes it look like really gold material. So I'm going to paint both of these so that they do have the appearance of gold. And I made this little top thing to go on the scepter that's going to hide the groove where I have the thread. And while we're letting those pieces dry, we're going to work on some other parts of the costume. So I have all these beads that I've collected over the years, and I'm going to make use of some of these to make the strings that hang down. But they do have what looks like sticks at the very bottom, so I'm using these toothpicks that have a sort of decorative part on one end. It's pointed on one, and then there's this sort of like carved decorative part on the other end. It's flat. So I'm cutting all these off. I'm going to have 3 of them because it looks like there's 3. And that's what's going to be attached to the hanging beads. And to do that, what I'm doing is I'm stringing the beads on just regular thread, just regular sewing thread. And then I'm going to glue the very end of it to that stick. So I'm using a combination of gold beads and some white beads that are a little bit longer, and then some a little bit darker beads. I just want it to look not glittery like a doll, but more, like an antique Egyptian would have, I guess is the best way to put it. So I'm not really using crystals, but I'm using these sort of polished gold looking beads. All right, so now I'm just going to take some glue, put it on the top of that, and glue it to the very top of that stick after I've put the beads on it. Now I think what happened here is my glue fell off. So I have to do it again. But I put a pretty good glob on there because I've got a knot at the end of that beaded section, and I want it to absorb that glob of of glue that I put on the end of the toothpick. And then I am going to paint the toothpick white. So just trying to match these up as best I can. Then I'm going to lay those over on the aluminum foil while I finish the others. And after I did, this is how they turned out. I think they look pretty good. But now I'm going to just take some acrylic paint that I have on hand and paint these sticks at the end, the toothpick sticks. And that way they will sort of look like what was in the picture. Not exactly, but sort of. I think it's hard to try to come up with really authentic looks for some of this stuff because there's just not items available that you could use. You know, you to the best of your ability, you can sometimes make things up like this toothpick trick, but sometimes you just can't do it. All right, so those are going to be on the end of that scepter. I'm going to let those dry. Hopefully this will all come together and look right. I hope so. Anyway, now I'm going to take some blue acrylic paint to make stripes on the scepter rod and that hook rod to make it look like what's in that picture. And I've seen those different colors. I've seen them white and gold. I've seen them blue and white, blue and gold. I'm not sure of the significance of the colors, but maybe if you look those up, you can figure that out. I just hadn't had time. Went to St. Augustine this weekend with my husband and our little dogs. And so I had most of this pre-recorded throughout the week, and I'm just wrapping everything up here Sunday night and getting the voiceover done so we can get it up on YouTube. And then next week I'll be working on the last part of the costume. Hopefully, I guess that'll probably be the end of this series. I should be able to finish everything up by then. It's just that there are so many small pieces like this that take some time to assemble and paint. And then you're going to have to let it dry, and then you put glue on it, and you have to let that dry. So it's pretty time consuming. I try to work on it when I come home from work a little bit, but I'm usually pretty pooped when I come home from work. So it's like a whole nother job when I come home and have to do more stuff with the YouTube. But at least this is fun stuff, right? All right, so now we've got the crown that's been smoothed out on the inside and fits a little bit better, and I'm putting the glue on the inside to attach this hair piece to. Now I'm not putting the hair attachment on the glue where that sewn part is. I'm actually putting it on the hair beneath it because that sewn part is actually, it's kind of thick, and I'm still trying to make the inside of this as thin as possible so it will fit her head properly. So I want to make sure that all those little hairs are glued down. So I did actually go back and put glue on the inside of the hairs as well, and then press them down with my fingers. So now I've got that scepter that has the groove in the top, and I'm just going to lay these beaded pieces that we made and the threads into that. But first I'm going to put some glue, of course, down in there to hold it, because I'm going to clip those threads off as soon as it's dry. So I'm putting glue down into that groove, and then we're going to place the threads of these beaded pieces down into the groove. And of course that's always not as easy as you think it was going to be. All right, so that will hang down. I want to leave just a little bit of the thread so it will hang down properly. Then I'll put some more glue on top, and then we're going to place that top part, decorative top part on there to kind of hide the groove and to give it just a little more something something. And then we're going to let that dry. Then I can clip off the excess thread, but I like the way that turned out. Looks pretty good. Maybe not completely authentic Egyptian, but very close. All right, so this piece has dried now, and what I want to do is go around and clip that top part of the hair off that has the sewing on it, the weave part. So I'm just taking my little small scissors because they work better in these tight places. Now there is just a little residue of the hair showing up above no matter how much I try to trim it as closely as possible, and I don't want that to show. So what I'm going to do is put some gold braid right on top of that seam between the crown and the hair, so the tops of the hair doesn't show above the brim of the crown. So I'm just using this gold braid trim, starting behind the cobra head to hide it, and then just pressing that down right over that seam to hide it. And this just gives it also a little bit of something extra. Nice little touch to finish off that crown. Because it's gold, and gold is good, right? So I'm going to let that dry, and actually ended up doing the braiding and everything in the next video, so you'll have to wait for that. But this was getting so time consuming, and I didn't want to make the video too super long. So at this point, our two pieces here have dried, and they're looking really good. So can go ahead and snip off that thread that's at the end of the scepter, because those threads are nice and secured by the glue under that cap. And just to make sure that you don't see any of that white of the thread, I'm going to just take a dab of the blue paint that I had left from painting them and cover that piece up. So now you can't even tell that there was a hole there. Yep, so our scepters, or whatever they're called, they're finished. And we'll position them in her hands when we get to the very end, probably in the next video. Now the other part of this crown that I want to work on in this video is painting the cobra. Usually the cobra underneath the head was painted in some way, sometimes with symbols that had meanings to the Egyptians. I'm not going to try to do anything meaningful because I really don't know exactly what the meanings would be. I know some of the symbols like the Ankh, or Isis, things like that. But for this cobra, basically what I'm going to do is work in some greens and blues and black, because those colors, I think, sort of remind me of the pictures that I've seen of the cobra crowns, and also I think they help to blend in with her outfit that we're working on. And the green that I have is going to need several coats, so you'll see me put more than one coat on there. I'm just making these lines across here for the snake's underbelly, and as you can see, I'm still having a little trouble with the steadiness of my right hand, so some of those lines are not exactly perfect, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix that in just a minute. I'm just putting some more of that green on to make sure that that looks solid green instead of streaky like it did when I first put it on. This green, for some reason, has always been that way. The other colors that I have seem to work much better, much more solid. But I want it to look nice, so I don't mind putting the extra coats on. So now I'm going to back with my gold paint that I love, and I'm going to try to even up some of those black lines by putting a gold stripe on either side of the black line, and it's going to blend in with the gold of the clay, so it's going to, it's not going to stand out that I'm trying to fix my mistakes, in other words. And actually, when I finished and looked at it, I liked it because that gold is a lot shinier than the gold of the clay, so it kind of gave an extra shininess to the cobra's belly that turned out to look pretty nice. Really does kind of shine like gold. I kind of like that. I opted not to paint the rest of that squiggly tail just because I thought it looked better plain like that. I thought it would be just a little bit too extra if I put paint on that as well. I just want to focus on the head part. I did put some blue and red dots on the inside of the cobra's head. just to have some sort of design in there, since there usually is some sort of design. So I just put like a blue circle and then a red dot under it. And then after all this was finished, I don't show it on here, I did put some of the high gloss enamel finish on the top just to give it a protective coating and a little extra shine. So that's how that turned out. I think that turns out pretty good. And I think it'll go with the colors and the rest of her costume as well. Now onto the dress, we're going to start the front and then the two sides of the back. I did go ahead and use the fray check on this satin material because it does tend to fray, and I want to make sure that my seams hold well. And I did use this small paintbrush to apply it so that I don't get a whole bunch of it, because it does tend to leach into the fabric, and then you have to really watch how much fabric you have to make your seam or it'll show. Now for the back, I'm going to sew the back seam, and I'm going to come down a couple of inches to about right here to start the seam, and that will leave it open up to the waist so that we can get it on the doll. Now I made this pattern just by holding it up to the doll and just sort of eyeballing it like I usually do, and you know, I try to tend to leave a little extra in the seam so that I can have room if I'm off. You know, I'll have room to take it out and re-sew it. Now I'm sewing the side seams, and I am going to leave that one side open for a slit on the side. And the way I'm finishing it is to just turn that seam back and hem over the top of it to finish it. So I've got the back part open and the slit up one of the sides. And just was taking a little measurement there to see how I was doing with my seams, and they seem to be doing pretty well. So I'm going to finish up sewing this and then try it on the doll just to make sure of the fit and see if I need to make any seams. Oopsie, there, her bottom's showing. I'm going to have to open up those side seams just a little bit. They almost are enough, but I'm really forcing it to make it go together. So I just ripped out the seams there around the hip area, went back in and made those just the tiniest bit bigger because I don't want it to be really overlapping. I want to sew it together at the end. So I'm just making it a tiny bit bigger, but enough so that it will meet without having to really force it, and that looks pretty good. So at this point, we want to attach the skirt to the bodice, which we had worked on in the previous video. So now this is the dress skirt, and this is the top part, remember that. So now we want to attach this to the skirt by putting the two right sides together, and then we'll sew a seam across the waist area. So I'm just making sure I have the center correct and then pinning the sides down, and I'm just going to sew across there. It doesn't go all the way to the back seam, but that's part of my plan. Actually, that was my plan. I want it to be open down to the back. So just making a seam on the sewing machine. I did get my new presser foot in for the electric foot control, so that was good. I was sad when I broke my other one, but thank goodness for Amazon and Prime. I got it in 2 days, so I'm back in business. Alright, so that's done. Now I can trim off any excess pieces up at the top, and now we have our sort of halter top attached. Now I try it on the doll and see how it looks and if it's going to fit properly, and that looks really nice. So now I just have to sew up the back seam, and that part of the dress will be finished. And this is how it looked after I finished. She does have her shoes on there, but we'll get to more complete views when we finish the dress. I still have to do like a gold sash around the waist and some things, embellishments on the front, and then I'm going to have sort of a trailing cape that is going to trail down behind her, attached up at the shoulders. So we have those pieces to work on. We have to finish the hair piece and a few other things. And that'll be in the next part, and we'll probably be finished. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Thanks, and bye.